Where Pierre was there was a 17th birthday party.
Yeah. 16th.
Whatever. You know what? I didn't want to be rude, so I said 70th. Just I thought I'd throw it in. Actually, Pierre the other day overheard Mulcair. I think he's ahead of some other party anyway, making a comment that, and by the way, the joke about 70th birthday party is owned by someone else. I stole it because it's being used against you. Mulcair the other day was making a comment that he'd rather be right than be Prime Minister. And quickly, Pierre said to him, "Then you don't have to worry about either of those." Thank you very much. I want to start actually by thanking Pierre and the Conservative Party because while I was the police chief here in Ottawa, both Pierre and specifically Pierre and Minister Baird fought very hard for some things that were very close to me. 5 years ago when I started, I had a discussion with a number of people about the need for drug treatment and school-based programming in the city, as drug addiction is a huge problem for us, as it is every city in this country. And more specifically, it's a huge problem for young people in the city. I met with Pierre, I think once or twice, explained to him what we were trying to do, build 2 drug treatment centers, and as well put in school-based programming in every high school in the city. We needed $6 million. And I said to Pierre, it would be great if the federal government would find $1 million to help kickstart this process. Pierre, I think, ran 2 ministers out of the health department over the next 12 months as he banged on their door every day to get us $1 million to kickstart. And I want to thank you very much for that. You should know that initiative, which also received $1.3 million from the SENS Foundation, their second largest cause they've ever donated to after Rogers House, has resulted in the opening of a French drug treatment center in Verne and an English one off of Richardson Side Road run by Dave Smith Center. The one in Verne is run by Maison Fraternité, and as well, it now sees all 57 high schools in the city with a drug treatment counselor, and that will make a huge difference for young people in this city. And again, it was because some people took it on and decided that it was that important for them. So, congratulations again. The second cause was that we had identified to both Pierre and Minister Baird that policing in the nation's capital is different than anywhere else in Canada. That you can be the police chief of Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Toronto, God help you, Montreal. I'm joking. No, I'm not. Anyway, you can be the police chief of any of those cities. You do not have the same challenges because we have the nation's capital here that we have. I mean, I know you'll remember 13 days of the demonstrations by the Tamils, for example. And the cost that comes with that. And with the support of our local Conservative members of Parliament, we received $10 million from the federal government, and not one other police service in Canada saw that money. So again, with the support we've been getting from this government, not everybody sees, not everybody talks about, but I think it's important for us to continue to talk about how important it was for all of us. So anyway, thanks again for that. As you know, a few months ago I changed jobs. The first 2 weeks I hated it, I have to be honest. Disconnecting from my old job was extremely challenging for me. Sleeping through the night, I don't remember the last time that's happened. But I have to say in the last couple of months that I've had an opportunity to really see the chance that we have to make a difference in this country. I sit on the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. We push through C-10, which I know for many people were challenged by parts of C-10, but the pieces they miss was that we were trying to make, and we will make this country safer. Things like, as an example, we could have somebody on parole for a sex offense, not to be near somebody under the age of 16, and we could see them as a police officer with somebody under 16 and could not arrest them prior to the C-10. Could not arrest them for breach of parole, and now we can. So there's some pieces to that legislation, because it does focus on the criminals that we need to focus on. It does. And it does allow us, and we had victims tell us that for the first time we had legislation that will be victim-centered and about accountability. I did an interview with CTV right afterwards, Don Martin, and he challenged my my perspective on Bill C-10, and I told him then, I said, this is about accountability and victims. That's all this is about. You can pick apart all the pieces. The reality, it all went in one bill, because every time we tried to drive a bill through the House, the other party, the third party now, would step in the way of it. But for us right now, honestly, it was about making a difference in our community we have. We can talk about C-19, the long gun registry. I mean, nobody argues that if I want a gun, I have to take the 2-day course, I have to get a license. We want Canadians to understand that we're safe. But we had some witnesses comparing the long gun registry to the sex offender registry. Now, you wonder why law-abiding Canadians were offended by this? It's because they were offended by the fact that even some Canadians didn't understand that this wasn't a registry of criminals, it was a registry of law-abiding Canadians. It was the largest registry of law-abiding Canadians in this country. The largest in the country. That's a reality. I remember being challenged and saying, well, why would we care if we wanted to know the number? And I said, because you think it will make us safer. It doesn't make us safer. Suggesting that knowing what the security number is on a firearm, that it's going to make us safer, is like suggesting that if we put a number on Chris Neal's stick, he's going to play cleaner. It doesn't work. It did not work. And many people would espouse, and I want to say hi to Ray and Maureen here, friends I worked with in the RCMP up in Inuvik, Yellowknife, Iqaluit, where else, right? And here in Ottawa, I guess. Many people said, well, the police will want to know if there's a gun in the house. Bullshit. They actually know there's a gun in every house. We go to every house, and we always have, thinking there's a gun in that house, because if we don't, we will be killed. That's the way it is. I heard Senator Eggleton talk about a fact, and his facts were that the police wanted to know because it allowed them to behave differently when they arrived at the house. I can tell you right now, it's not true. Every single call I went on, and Ray and I went on many of them, every call we went there expecting there to be a gun, because if we didn't, one of us weren't coming home. That's the way it is. The last piece of legislation that we're having a challenge with right now, I know in the House, is Bill C-30. I think we do need to have some more fulsome discussion publicly, and it is around the tracking in particular of internet and whether or not, and I think the rollout has been difficult, but whether or not we actually will be able to push that legislation through in the next year, I think is going to be difficult for all of us, because people don't fully understand. The legislation that we're looking at changing in C-30 really talks about being able to respond to today's technology. The old legislation is decades old from now, and the ability for us to actually find people is extremely difficult. As an example, a 14-year-old girl in Calgary went on Facebook and said she was going to kill herself. She left her house with her cell phone. It's a true story, by the way. The police got a call from parents of a friend who said on Facebook she said she's going to kill herself. The police called a service provider in Calgary who refused to give them the location of the cell phone. Refused. So instead of being able to go and find her within minutes, it took hours for them to find her, and they found her actually because friends knew where she might be, not because they were actually able to use the technology to their advantage. They're the types of stories that are out there today, and if we don't change the legislation and force service providers to give us immediate information in exigent, difficult circumstances, then we won't be safer community. And I think as we walk through this, you will see people talking about the real cases in Canada that will allow us to push C-30 through the House and through the Senate. So as you're listening, and if you have questions about that legislation, please email me, because I'd rather you have the information to talk about instead of using the very little that's out there by some of the fearmongers, in particular privacy commissions across the country. Sorry, I hate referring to my notes, but I have to this time. And remind me, I want to talk about InSight, supervised injection sites. I heard Bill talk about, you know what, we have the envy of all economies. I teach in China, I teach in India. Last year I was a year before last in Dominica and Australia. And I can tell you that every country I go to, all they talk about is how were we able to do this? How was Canada able to survive this economic downturn? The crunch. In Europe, I mean, for them, many people there will say it will be a generation from now before they will recover. And we're talking about recovering totally before the next election. And it is because we were a boring economy, as the Americans would call us, but we were a safe economy. And in the future, we will be a better economy than we are today. Now I'm going to talk about something that isn't always as palatable. When I talk about a safe economy, we continue to say that in 10 or 15 years, we won't have enough people in this country to do the jobs we have. Now, one of our challenges in that is that we have what I call our bookends of youth. Our two bookends right now, our fastest growing youth populations are first and new Canadians. Our fastest growing youth populations in this country. It's also our fastest growing population of people in prisons. We're going to have to do something over the next decade to refocus our energy on that demographic shift around education, training, and engagement if we want to be able to use those two opportunities of young people in this country to fulfill the jobs we're going to have in the next 10 years. So as a country, and I think as Canadians, we have to start thinking about how do we re-engage those two communities, first and new Canadians, because we cannot afford to lose out on their opportunity and our opportunities. The last thing I'm going to talk about is supervised injection sites. If you've heard about it, if you say the word safe, I will always correct you, because there's nothing safe about injecting heroin into your arm. When they opened the supervised injection site in Vancouver, the Vancouver police put 80 new officers in a new station across the road. 80. That's about $10 million in policing costs. So when they say the crime rate hasn't gone up, they might be right. Can you afford $10 million in policing for a square block area because you want to let people shoot heroin in their arms? The second piece to this, honestly, the second piece to this is that 5% of the addicted injection-using drug users in the Lower Mainland, specifically East Hastings, 5% of the people that use those drugs use the facility 12% of the time. That means it's not getting used. It's not getting used. You can walk around. I've done foot patrols with the police there. I've been into the facility 3 times. Within 2 blocks of the building, you cannot walk without crushing syringes on the streets. The other reality is the police actually have put a no-go zone in there that they don't arrest people for trafficking in drugs within a certain distance of the building. So it's become a place where anybody can do almost anything. The third thing is the average street-level addict in Vancouver commits 4 to 8 crimes every day to satisfy their addiction. That means we have 4 to 8 victims every day as a result of that. And then they go to a government-run facility where they shoot drugs, illegal drugs, into their arms. From a Canadian perspective, how do we think this sounds right? It does not sound right. The last point on this is if I was sick and I refused treatment and I bought kerosene and I showed up at the local civic hospital and told them I wanted to shoot it into my arms, they would have me arrested. But instead we have an addict who is sick, who is refusing treatment, who buys something no better than kerosene off the street, and they show up at a medical facility and we assist them in shooting it into their arms. It just doesn't make sense, folks. And when people in this city, and they're there, and they will be out here, start talking about why we need one, we cannot afford to sit in the back and let it happen. Because if we do, they will have one in this city. We need to be vigilant, and we need to show a level of rigor like you've never shown before to say, not in our city. This isn't about not in my backyard, not on my street. It's not right, not in our city. And you're going to have to say that. The last thing I wanted to say is that if we have anything going for us at all, Bob Ray will be the leader of the Liberal Party. Anything at all. As Pierre explained something to Bob 3 times in the same day, and at the end of it, Pierre just said, "Look, I can explain it for you. I can't comprehend it for you." I want to thank you very much for inviting me out. This is my 2nd ever political speech. Last week was my 1st. I want to appreciate your support, and I do want to thank you for the very nice comments about my previous job as police chief. Thank you very much.
Senator